My daughter kicked me out after taking my house because she said, "It's ours now." That's the knife she drove straight into my chest. 1 week later, she was crying on my doorstep while the bank froze every cent she thought was hers. Honey, if you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from, because what you're about to hear has more twists than a pretzel factory. The day it happened, the air smelled of lilies. Leftover funeral flowers, still fresh enough to trick you into thinking grief comes with perfume. Robert had been gone only 3 weeks. 40 years of marriage snatched by a heart attack that struck at 8:17 a.m. while he was tightening the hinges on our back gate. And there I was, standing in the kitchen, sorting sympathy cards. Each envelope, another reminder, widow, alone, disposable. That's when Victoria showed up. My only daughter. She swept in like she owned the place, heels clicking on the hardwood Robert had sanded with his own hands. Her husband Kevin followed behind, carrying a leather folder fat with papers, vultures in designer clothes. "Mom," she began, voice sugar-coated. "Kevin and I have been talking. This house, it's too big for you now. You shouldn't be rattling around alone. It's time we take over. We'll handle everything." I froze. Take over? Kevin opened the folder with a little flourish, like a magician showing off a trick. Inside, a deed, my deed. Or rather, a forged version with Robert's signature slashed across it. My breath hitched. Victoria smiled, smirked. "It's ours now, Mom. You can stay for a bit, maybe in the guest room. But long term, it doesn't make sense. You'll be happier somewhere smaller, like a retirement community. Less responsibility." "Less responsibility?" I repeated, my voice flat as stone. "Don't be dramatic," she snapped. "Dad wanted this. You're just the wife." The words hit harder than the eviction itself. Just the wife, not the woman who raised her, not the partner who built this home brick by brick with Robert. Just the wife. By 2 p.m., my suitcases were lined up by the front door. Victoria tapped her phone as movers carried boxes past me. She didn't even look up when she handed me $200 in cash. "This should tide you over until you find somewhere." Somewhere. As if 40 years of history could be swapped for a motel off Route 9. I loaded my bags into a cab. From the sidewalk, I glanced back. The curtains were already drawn. My house, Robert's house, had shut its eyes to me. At 6:15 that evening, I sat on the stiff bedspread of a cheap motel, the kind that smells like mildew and despair. The TV flickered with static. The lamp leaned at a wrong angle. I held the 2 crumpled bills in my lap like a cruel joke. "Do you know what it feels like to be erased, honey? Not forgotten, erased." But as I stared at that ugly floral wallpaper, something cracked open inside me. 40 years of nodding, smoothing things over, being the good wife, the patient mother, that version of me was buried with Robert. They thought I'd roll over. They thought pawn. But pawns cross the board, and sometimes pawns become queens. I whispered it into the silence. "Watch me." The next morning, I pulled out Robert's old lockbox from my suitcase. He'd left it to me with a note written in his neat engineer's hand. "If anything happens, see Harrison Daniels. Trust him." I didn't know what I would find, but at that moment, the words weren't just instructions. They were a lifeline. By 8:30 a.m., I had decided. Victoria might have thrown me out, but I wasn't going quietly. I wasn't going to vanish into motel mildew. This wasn't the end. It was the opening move. And honey, I was just getting started. Let me rewind, honey, because betrayal doesn't just fall from the sky, it builds, brick by brick, while you're too busy grieving to notice the scaffolding. Robert's funeral was on a Saturday, 11 a.m., St. Matthew's Chapel. The lilies filled every pew, heavy and sweet, masking the scent of damp wool coats. I sat in the front row, black gloves twisting in my lap, 40 years beside him, and suddenly it was just me and a coffin. Victoria arrived late. Not fashionably late, obnoxiously late. The kind of late that says, "This isn't my priority." Her heels echoed down the aisle as the pastor paused mid-prayer. She clutched Kevin's arm like she was walking a runway, not into her father's memorial. "Mom," she whispered as she slid in beside me, perfume choking out the flowers. "You should have told me the casket would be closed. Dad would have wanted an open one." I bit down on my tongue. Robert had looked like wax at the end, tubes and tape mummifying him. He would not be paraded. I'd made that call to protect him. But to her, it was an inconvenience. During the eulogy, Kevin's phone buzzed twice. He didn't silence it. He didn't even blush. He just leaned back, scanning the crowd as though calculating which one of these mourners could help him later. When the service ended, I stood by the door, shaking hands, accepting murmured condolences. People clutched my fingers like they might keep me from floating away. But Victoria? She wasn't beside me. She was across the room, laughing too loudly with a cousin she hadn't spoken to in 10 years. At 2:17 p.m., after the last guest trickled out, she finally approached me. "Mom, let's be practical. Dad's gone. The house it's wasted on one person. You don't need all that space." I blinked. "He's not even in the ground yet." Kevin stepped in, voice oily. "Exactly. It's the right time to get affairs in order. You don't want to deal with it while you're emotional later." Emotional. As if grief was an obstacle, not proof I had loved and been loved. "Robert wanted me here," I said, spine stiff. Victoria's smile dropped. For the first time, the mask cracked. "Mom, you're just the wife. Dad built that company. He earned that house. And we're his blood. Just the wife." The phrase carved itself into me like acid. Blood. As though 40 years of partnership evaporated because I didn't share his DNA. The room tilted. I thought of the nights Robert and I painted walls until midnight, eating pizza on milk crates before the dining set arrived. The years of patching roofs, saving receipts, planning for a future. If that made me just the wife, then what did marriage even mean? I remember the exact time because I checked my watch, 2:21 p.m. That was the moment I stopped seeing my daughter as my flesh and blood. She was a stranger wearing my child's face. She straightened her coat. "We'll swing by tomorrow. Bring the paperwork. It'll be easier if you sign voluntarily." "Paperwork?" I croaked. Kevin patted the folder under his arm, smirking. "Don't worry, we've handled everything." That night, back at the house, I couldn't sleep. The halls echoed with Robert's absence, every creak of the floorboards a reminder. At 3 a.m., I padded into his study. His desk lamp still smelled faintly of his aftershave. I pulled open drawers, searching for something, anything that proved I wasn't invisible. And there it was, a plain envelope marked with my name. Inside, one line in Robert's handwriting. "If anything happens, see Harrison Daniels. Trust him." For the first time in weeks, my breath steadied. At 7:45 the next morning, I was standing at the window when Victoria pulled up, Kevin behind her like a shadow. She didn't even knock, she used her old key. I watched her stride into my kitchen, my sanctuary, like it was already hers. "Morning, Mom," she chirped, fake, bright. "Ready to sign?" She slid the papers across the counter. Property transfer. My name scratched out, Robert's forged signature in its place. She actually thought I would go along quietly. When I didn't move, she sighed, snapping, "Don't make this hard. Dad wouldn't want drama. He'd want us to be practical. You're just the wife." That line again. She wielded it like a weapon, each repetition dulling any chance it had been a slip. I looked her straight in the eye. "If I'm just the wife, Victoria, then you're just the daughter. Let's see how far that gets you." Her eyes narrowed. Kevin shifted, uncomfortable. For the first time, they saw it the pawn wasn't rolling over. But they underestimated me. They always had. And honey, that was their first mistake. You'd think after a funeral, after 40 years of marriage, after raising a daughter through chickenpox, algebra, and heartbreak, I'd at least earn the dignity of sleeping one more night under my own roof. Honey, think again. At exactly 11:42 a.m., the next day, the moving truck pulled up. White, unmarked, 2 men in navy coveralls. They didn't look at me as they unloaded dollies and straps. They didn't need to. The orders had been given. Victoria waltzed in first, jangling my house keys like a prize. "Mom, we need to do this quickly. I've got a Pilates class at 2. I stared. "You're putting me out of my house in under 3 hours? Kevin smirked, waving a clipboard. "The deed says it's ours now. You're free to take your personal items, clothes, keepsakes, essentials. The rest stays." The rest. My china cabinet, Robert's record collection, the quilt my grandmother stitched during the Depression. The rest wasn't furniture, it was my life. I whispered, "This is theft." Victoria's eyes hardened. "This is reality. You don't need a 5-bedroom house. You'll thank us later." At 12:15 p.m., one of the movers hoisted my wedding portrait off the wall. The glass cracked as it left its nail. I flinched like I'd been struck. By 1:07 p.m., my suitcases were stacked like luggage for a trip I hadn't booked. Victoria shoved $200 into my palm, 2 crumpled bills, as though I was a beggar, not her mother. "Here," she said, "this should cover a few nights. Find somewhere reasonable." Reasonable. The word stung worse than just the wife. The cab ride was silent except for the meter clicking higher with each block. At 1:54 p.m., we pulled up to the Route 9 Budget Inn. The sign flickered. The B in budget was burnt out, so it read, "Budget Inn." Poetic. I dragged my bags up 2 flights of chipped concrete stairs. Room 217. The key stuck in the lock. When the door finally groaned open, the smell hit me first. Mildew, cigarettes, despair. The carpet was threadbare, patterned with stains that told their own silent horror stories. The lamp leaned at a crooked angle. The mattress sagged like a broken rib cage. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching Robert's lockbox. My knees shook. I wasn't crying, no. Tears would have been too merciful. What I felt was deeper, like being hollowed out. At 3 p.m., I flipped through the motel amenities booklet. Cable channels that didn't work. A vending machine with stale chips. Affordable weekly rates. I laughed, bitter and sharp. Affordable. I walked to the window. Outside, neon from the liquor store across the highway buzzed. Couples shouted in the parking lot. This was what my daughter had traded me for a house I had built, a life I had given her, in exchange for exile among peeling wallpaper and buzzing signs. By 6:22 p.m., the sun bled into the horizon. I poured myself a cup of motel coffee, burnt and sour, and stared at the 2 bills on the nightstand, $200. Enough for a week if I starved, a month if I stopped existing. That's when the rage set in. Cold, precise, electric. I opened Robert's lockbox. Inside, birth certificates, a worn watch, and the envelope he'd labeled in his tidy hand. "If anything happens, see Harrison Daniels. Trust him." I traced his signature with my fingertip. Trust him. Not her. Not them. Trust him. At 7:45 p.m., I called Daniels's office. The secretary answered, polite but firm. "Mr. Daniels is out until tomorrow morning." Tomorrow. I could survive one more night in mildew and cigarette smoke, but they'd miscalculated. They thought I'd disappear quietly into the shadows of the Budget Inn. They forgot something. Pawns crossed the board. At 9:13 p.m., I stood in front of the cracked bathroom mirror. My reflection looked older, yes, tired, worn. But in my eyes, something burned, something Victoria hadn't counted on. "Resolve," I whispered to the empty room. "Watch me." When I walked into Harrison Daniels's office at 9:07 a.m. sharp, I was still wearing the same blazer from yesterday, wrinkled, reeking faintly of motel disinfectant. "Honey, I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there for blood." The place smelled of lemon polish and quiet power. Mahogany bookshelves lined the walls. A brass clock ticked in solemn rhythm. Daniels himself, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, looked up as if he'd been expecting me for years. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said warmly, "finally, I wondered when you'd come." My throat tightened. "Finally?" "Harrison, my daughter threw me out yesterday. She told me I inherited nothing, that the will gave her everything." Daniels's smile froze. He gestured me into a leather chair. "That's not only untrue, that's impossible." He pulled a thick folder from his cabinet, bound with a blue ribbon. He laid it on the table like a priest placing scripture on the altar. "This," he said, sliding it toward me, "is Robert Sullivan's final will and testament, updated 6 months before he passed." I stared at the document. My husband's familiar handwriting marked the margins. My chest tightened at the sight of his signature firm, precise, alive, in a way he no longer was. Daniels cleared his throat. "I conducted the reading 2 weeks ago. Your daughter insisted you were too distraught. She said she'd handle everything." "Distraught?" My voice cracked. "She told me there was no reading, that she inherited all of it." The lawyer's jaw clenched. "That's fraud, Margaret, and I intend to prove it." He began to read aloud, voice steady as a gavel. "I, Robert James Sullivan, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife, Margaret Ann Sullivan, our primary residence at 847 Oakwood Drive, including all furnishings and personal effects. My fingers dug into the leather armrest. My house, Daniels continued. Additionally, I leave to Margaret 70% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts, totaling approximately $23 million. $23 million. I couldn't breathe. And then, the final blow. To my daughter, Victoria Sullivan Hayes, I leave $10 million to be held in trust, contingent upon her treatment of her mother following my death. Should she fail to treat Margaret with dignity and respect, the trust shall be forfeited, and all funds shall revert to Margaret. The words echoed like a thunderclap. Contingent, dignity, and respect. I looked up, stunned. You're telling me? I'm telling you, Daniels interrupted, eyes blazing behind his glasses, that by throwing you out, by lying about the will, by handing you motel money like a stranger, your daughter just disinherited herself. At 9:42 a.m., the ground shifted. I was no longer the widow sleeping in room 217 with mildew on the carpet. I was the legal heir of $33 million and the rightful owner of the house my daughter had stolen. The irony was so perfect it was almost comical. Victoria had shoved me into the dirt, certain I'd stay there. Instead, she'd tripped the very clause her father wrote to protect me. Daniels leaned forward, his tone fierce now. We'll move immediately. I'll contact the banks, the registrar, the courts. By this evening, every account will be frozen in your name. She won't be able to swipe a credit card without the world collapsing around her. My hands shook, but not from fear, from vindication. I whispered, Operation Justice. Daniels raised an eyebrow. I like that. Shall we begin? By 10:15 a.m., his secretary was faxing orders. By 10:23, the first bank confirmed account freezes. By 11:01, a detective friend of Daniels's was on the line, explaining how charges of elder abuse and fraud could stick. And by 11:30, I was no longer the discarded mother my daughter wanted me to be. I was the queen across the board, holding all the cards. As I left Daniels's office, sunlight broke through the clouds. For the first time since Robert's funeral, I felt warmth on my face. They thought I was powerless. They forgot pawns move forward, and sometimes pawns become queens. At exactly 2:17 p.m., the first domino fell. I was sitting in the back booth of a diner, nursing a watery cup of coffee, when my phone buzzed. Daniels's name lit the screen. His voice was brisk, almost gleeful. Margaret, it's begun. Bank of New England confirmed the freeze. Joint accounts, investment portfolios, credit cards, all inaccessible. I inhaled sharply. All of them? Every penny, Margaret. They won't be able to buy a sandwich without cash. I let out a laugh short, bitter, triumphant. Honey, the wheel had turned. By 3:06 p.m., the second domino crashed. Daniels called again. The utilities she transferred into her name? Suspended pending verification. Power, water, cable gone by midnight. The image hit me like champagne bubbles. Victoria flicking a switch, waiting for light, and nothing. Kevin standing over a cold stove, two entitled vultures blinking in the dark of my house. I whispered, perfect. Daniels chuckled. Not yet, but give it an hour. And then, at 3:47 p.m., my phone rang. Her name filled the screen, Victoria. For a heartbeat, I just stared. The daughter who had shoved me out with $200 now needed something from me. I answered, voice steady. Hello, Victoria. Her tone was shrill, jagged. Mom, what's going on? The bank says Daddy's accounts are frozen. They're saying something about ownership disputes. Why didn't you tell me? I almost laughed. Tell you, sweetheart? I just came from Mr. Daniels's office. Silence, the kind that crackles. You remember him, don't you? I continued smoothly. Daddy's attorney. The one who read the real will to an empty room while you told him I was too distraught. Her voice wavered. Mom, I don't know what you think you heard, but... Oh, I know exactly what I heard. I cut her off like a blade. I inherited the house, 70% of the assets. And do you know what else? The $10 million Daddy left you is now mine too. You forfeited it the moment you treated me without dignity and respect. That clause was written with you in mind. She gasped. That's impossible. Impossible? I savored the word. No, honey, irony. The irony was so perfect it was almost poetic. Her mask slipped. The faux concern melted, revealing raw panic. Mom, listen. You're confused. The grief it's clouding your judgment. You can't handle investments, trusts, any of this. That's why Daddy left it to me, to protect you. I smiled into the phone, though she couldn't see it. Protect me? You threw me into a motel room with peeling wallpaper. You handed me crumpled bills like a maid's tip. That isn't protection, sweetheart. That's cruelty. Her tone sharpened, desperate. You wouldn't dare press charges against your own daughter. My answer was ice cold, a dagger wrapped in silk. Watch me. At 4:12 p.m., she tried again. This time with Kevin on speaker. His voice was low, oily. Margaret, surely we can settle this quietly. No need to drag family through the courts. Let's talk numbers, a compromise. I leaned back in the diner booth, listening to the hum of the neon sign outside. Numbers? Let's see. 33 million, a house, and my dignity. And in return, you offered me mildew and vending machine coffee. Kevin hesitated. That was unfortunate. Temporary. We can fix this. I cut him off with a single word. Affordable. The silence on the line was delicious. By 5 p.m., Daniels called again. Detective Rodriguez is on board. She's reviewing the forged documents your daughter waved around. Very sophisticated work, Margaret. Not amateur hour. Likely Kevin's network. I closed my eyes. So it wasn't just her. No, but don't worry, we've got enough to freeze everything. Operation Justice is in motion. At 6:08 p.m., I walked back into the Udgett Inn, past the flickering neon. My reflection in the smeared lobby mirror wasn't the same woman who'd checked in 2 nights ago. That woman was hollow, broken. This one? She was holding all the cards. I sat on the sagging bed, phone still warm from Victoria's frantic calls, and whispered to the empty room, "This isn't over. This is just the beginning." Because pawns, honey, keep moving forward, and I was 1 square away from checkmate. By 8:30 p.m. that Friday, justice wasn't just a plan on Daniel's desk. It was a spectacle unfolding under the chandeliers of Leonard's Steakhouse. Victoria and Kevin had chosen the most ostentatious spot in town to celebrate their inheritance. White tablecloths, $200 bottles of wine, waiters in black vests hovering like bodyguards. The perfect stage. Detective Rodriguez didn't bother with subtlety. 4 officers in plain clothes slipped between the tables, badges flashing like camera bulbs. Victoria Sullivan Hayes? Her voice carried over the clink of silverware. Victoria froze mid-laugh, forks suspended above her plate. Kevin half rose, but a hand pressed firmly on his shoulder. "You're under arrest for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy." The restaurant fell silent. Forks clattered. Diners whispered. Victoria's perfect composure shattered. "This is a mistake. My mother, she's confused. She's grieving." I wasn't there, but Detective Rodriguez later relayed every detail with relish. Margaret, she screamed about false arrest while Kevin demanded to call his lawyer. A golf buddy, no criminal experience, amateur hour. By 9:02 p.m., they were in cuffs, their $300 stakes cooling on the plates. Operation Justice had gone public, but the Hayes family didn't lick their wounds quietly. No, honey. At 10:14 a.m. the next morning, my doorbell rang. Through the lace curtain, I saw her, Eleanor Hayes, Kevin's mother. Perfectly coiffed, pearls gleaming, posture stiff with generational arrogance. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "Margaret," she said smoothly, as if we were meeting for brunch, "we need to discuss this situation rationally." I arched a brow. "Your son helped forge documents to steal my inheritance. Rationality left the building a long time ago." She glided past me anyway, seating herself in my living room like it was hers. "Kevin made poor choices, yes, but prosecuting him. Vindictive, don't you think?" I laughed, short and sharp. "Vindictive? He threw me out of my own house. With my daughter's blessing. That's not a poor choice, that's felony fraud." Eleanor crossed her legs, diamonds flashing. Kevin was following Victoria's lead. He didn't understand the full picture. Ah, the audacity. "When in doubt, blame the woman." "Mrs. Hayes," I said coldly, "your son created forged legal documents. That's conspiracy, not confusion." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Let's speak plainly. A trial would drag our family name through the mud. Embarrass everyone. What if we found another way? A settlement. I folded my arms. What kind of settlement? Kevin's family is prepared to compensate you. $2 million in exchange for dropping the charges against him. I stared. $2 million to forgive the man who had tried to strip me of $33 million. I stood, pacing slowly. You think $2 million covers the price of betrayal? Of exile? Of being handed cash like a beggar? Margaret, be realistic. Kevin has a career, children, a reputation. Sending him to prison serves no one. I turned, eyes sharp. It serves justice. Her mask cracked. Just slightly. $5 million, she snapped. Final offer. The amount was staggering, but the principle was non-negotiable. My answer is no. Eleanor rose, smoothing her skirt. The pearls at her throat caught the light like shackles. Very well. But you should know, Margaret. Kevin's legal team has found information about Robert's business dealings, irregularities, payments, associations. Things that might change how the courts see his fortune. A chill licked my spine. Are you threatening me? I'm informing you, she said coolly. If this goes to trial, your late husband's name will not emerge unscathed. Do you really want that? She swept toward the door, composure restored. Think carefully. Family legacies are fragile. It would be unfortunate if yours collapsed entirely. When the door clicked shut at 10:46 a.m., the house felt colder than ever. Eleanor's words gnawed at me. Irregularities. Business dealings. Had Robert been hiding something? I poured myself a glass of water, hands trembling. The irony was unbearable. Victoria had been undone by greed, and now Kevin's mother was trying to undo me with ghosts from Robert's past. But one truth remained. I was done being anyone's pawn. I whispered to the empty living room. Operation Justice doesn't pause for threats. Because pawns keep moving, honey. And queens? Queens call the shots. By 11:22 a.m., I was still pacing my living room, Eleanor's threat echoing in my ears. Irregularities, associations, legacies collapsing. For 43 years, I'd believed Robert Sullivan was an honest man. Stubborn, traditional, sometimes patronizing about money but honest. What if I'd been wrong? The thought gnawed like acid. At 2:15 p.m., Daniels called. His tone was careful, too careful. Margaret, there's something we need to talk about, and I won't sugarcoat it. I sank into Robert's old armchair. Go on. Our investigator pulled records from his consulting firm. Payments routed through shell companies. Consulting fees that don't add up. And some of those names? They match front organizations flagged by the FBI. My stomach dropped. You're saying Robert laundered money? Daniels exhaled. That's what it looks like, for at least a decade, maybe longer. The room spun. The man who brought me roses every anniversary. The father who paid for Victoria's private school. The husband who held me through my mother's funeral. He'd been moving dirty money all along? I pressed my palms to my face. This can't be true. But Daniel's silence told me otherwise. He cleared his throat. And it gets worse. The $10 million Robert earmarked for Victoria? It originated directly from those flagged accounts. If the FBI digs into this, they could seize everything. The house, the investments, all of it. The words hit like a second funeral. I might lose everything. By 5:03 p.m., Detective Rodriguez arrived, bringing a folder thick enough to break bones. She spread photos, contracts, invoices across my dining table. These, she said grimly, are forged consulting agreements, payments to non-existent firms, patterns we've seen in organized crime laundering. Your husband's company was a hub. I stared at the pages. Robert's signature leapt from the margins like ghosts. This isn't possible, I whispered. Rodriguez's eyes softened. Margaret, I know this is hard, but you need to understand the risk. If Kevin's legal team tips off the feds, they'll come after your assets. And if you don't come forward voluntarily, they might see you as complicit. Complicit. The word seared my ears. Me, the woman who ironed his shirts, hosted his clients, baked cookies for fundraisers, complicit in laundering millions. At 6:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. Victoria's number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was low, urgent. Mom, I know about Daddy's business. Kevin explained everything. You think you're safe, but you're not. The feds will take it all unless we cooperate together. My throat tightened. Cooperate? Yes. Kevin's already talking to his lawyers. They can cut a deal immunity for us. 5 million for you, plus the house, but only if you stop pushing charges. I nearly dropped the phone. She was offering me scraps of my own inheritance, funded by my husband's crimes, in exchange for silence. You're blackmailing me with your father's sins? I asked coldly. Not blackmail, Mom. Reality. You'll lose everything if you don't play along. When the call ended, I sat in Robert's study, my study now, and opened the locked file drawers. The evidence was undeniable. Invoices for companies that didn't exist, payments lining up with headlines about drug busts and smuggling cases, a world I'd never glimpsed, unfolding in black ink under my fingertips. At 9:32 p.m., I whispered to the empty room, "Robert, what did you do?" No answer came. Just the ticking clock and the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest. By 11:05 p.m., Daniels called again. "Margaret, you need to decide. We can either go to the FBI voluntarily or risk Victoria and Kevin beating us to it. If they sell Robert's secrets first, they'll spin the narrative and you'll be collateral damage." I clenched my jaw. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, had turned my husband's sins into her bargaining chip. The pawn to queen journey wasn't over, but the board had changed. And honey, the irony was savage. Robert thought his clause about dignity and respect would protect me from Victoria, but it was his dirty money that handed her the sharpest knife. I poured myself a glass of Robert's scotch, the one he always saved for victories. The amber liquid burned down my throat. Then I said it aloud, steady and cold. "This isn't the end of me, it's the end of them. Because pawns don't crumble when the game shifts. We adapt." And I wasn't done playing. By 7:58 p.m. the next evening, I was sitting in my living room with a wire taped to my chest. The recorder's red light blinked like a heartbeat under my blouse. FBI agent Sarah Martinez adjusted the mic, her tone clipped and calm. "Mrs. Sullivan, remember, just let them talk. Don't push too hard. We want them comfortable." Comfortable? Honey, after what they did, comfort was the last thing on my mind, but I nodded. At exactly 8 p.m., headlights swept across my driveway. Victoria and Kevin, punctual as executioners. Kevin carried his leather briefcase like it was a nuclear code. Victoria wore her favorite designer jacket, the one Robert had bought her for law school graduation. She looked sharp, desperate, but sharp. I opened the door. "Come in." Victoria kissed my cheek like nothing had happened. "Mom, you look better. I'm so glad we can finally talk reasonably." Reasonably. The word tasted sour. We sat at the dining table. Kevin snapped open his briefcase. Papers gleamed under the lamp. "Margaret," he began smoothly, "our attorneys have structured this very favorably for you. You retain the house, 5 million in clean assets, and complete immunity from anything related to Robert's activities." "Clean assets?" I repeated, raising a brow. Kevin smiled thinly. "The rest, unfortunately, is tainted. Best to let it go." I tapped my finger on the table. "So, 33 million, reduced to 5. And in return, what do you two get?" Victoria leaned forward, voice velvet and steel. "Our charges disappear. Kevin's reputation stays intact. Our family can heal." Heal? Like motel walls and forged documents were just bruises to be kissed better. I tilted my head. "Tell me something, Kevin. When did you discover Robert's activities? Before you married my daughter, or after you decided to steal from me?" Kevin's jaw tightened. "That's not relevant." "Oh, it's relevant," I said, my voice slicing. "Because if you knew all along, you're an accessory. And if you only discovered it during your little forgery scheme, that makes you remarkably unlucky." Victoria's mask cracked. "Mom, stop it. You don't know what you're saying." I smiled sweetly. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm saying. And so does Agent Martinez." Their faces drained. "Agent, who?" Kevin whispered. That was the cue. The door burst open. FBI agents flooded the room, badges raised, guns holstered, but ready. "Kevin Hayes, Victoria Sullivan Hayes, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, elder abuse, and attempted extortion of a federal witness." Victoria's chair scraped back. "Mom, how could you? Your own daughter? The same way you forged papers and threw me out of my house," I said coolly. "Except my way is legal." Kevin lunged for the briefcase, but an agent snatched it midair. Don't bother, Martinez said dryly. We'll enjoy the reading. As they cuffed Victoria, she turned to me, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Please, Mom, think of the children. Don't do this. I stood, voice calm as stone. I am thinking of them. I'm showing them what happens when greed tramples family. Kevin tried one last shot, his tone oily. Margaret, you don't understand what you've done. Robert was connected to people you don't want to cross. Dangerous people. You've put yourself at risk. Agent Martinez arched an eyebrow. Mr. Hayes, are you threatening a federal witness? I'm warning her about reality, he snapped. Good, she said evenly. Then reality just added witness intimidation to your charges. By 9:14 p.m., the house was quiet again. Kevin and Victoria were gone, escorted into the night in the back of unmarked cars. Agent Martinez closed her folder and looked at me across the table. Mrs. Sullivan, there's something else you should know. About Robert. I braced myself. Another dagger. Your husband wasn't just laundering money. He was an FBI informant. For 12 years, he worked deep cover, feeding us intelligence on organized crime. The accounts you inherited are legally yours, federal compensation for his cooperation. The world tilted. My Robert hadn't been a criminal. He'd been a soldier in a shadow war. The $33 million is clean, Martinez said firmly. You're not losing a penny, and you're not complicit in anything. In fact, his work helped us put away dozens of people like the Torinos. Without him, we'd never have built the cases. I pressed a trembling hand to my lips. Relief, grief, fury, love, a storm all at once. The irony was almost poetic. Victoria tried to use Robert's secrets to strip me bare, and instead, those secrets exonerated me and damned her. At 10:03 p.m., I poured myself a glass of wine from Kevin's abandoned stash. I stood in my kitchen watching the agents drive away. For the first time in weeks, the house felt alive. Not Robert's, not Victoria's, mine. I raised the glass, whispered into the silence. The best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming everything they swore you'd never be. And honey, pawns don't just move forward. Sometimes, they flip the whole board. 6 months later, I was standing in a kitchen that finally felt like mine. Not Robert's kingdom, not Victoria's stolen prize, mine. Sunlight poured through the new bay windows I'd chosen myself. Counters gleamed with marble I'd picked, not a contractor or a husband. On the table sat a folder stamped the Margaret Sullivan Foundation for Elder Protection. $15 million of my inheritance had already been poured into legal aid, housing grants, and scholarships for seniors who'd been discarded like I once was. My phone buzzed constantly with caseworkers and advocates thanking me for changing lives. I sipped coffee from a mug that said Pawn to Queen. At 9 a.m. sharp, Sarah Chen, my new financial advisor, sister to the investigator who'd helped uncover Robert's truth, arrived with quarterly reports. She set the thick binder down, smiling. Your portfolio is performing beautifully, Margaret. The scholarship fund has already placed 5 students, and the hotline fielded over 300 calls last month. You're making a real difference. I flipped through the glossy pages, numbers lining up like soldiers. Funny, I said dryly. They used to tell me I couldn't balance a checkbook. Now I'm running a multi-million-dollar foundation. Sarah laughed. The irony is almost poetic. But not every ghost had been buried. Victoria had written me 17 letters from federal prison. I stopped opening them after the 3rd. Each one swung between self-pity, denial, and hollow apologies. The last envelope sat unopened in my desk drawer, heavy with words I no longer needed. At 10:15 a.m., her lawyer called. Mrs. Sullivan, Victoria wishes to apologize in person. She hopes for reconciliation. I took a long sip of coffee. Reconciliation? She told me to find somewhere else to die. She forged papers to steal my life. Actions have consequences. Prison is hers. But she's still your daughter, he pressed. I smiled thinly. Family? No. That's DNA. Family are the people who protect you when you're vulnerable, not the ones who exploit it. He didn't argue. At noon, I walked through what used to be Robert's study. I'd gutted the oak-paneled seriousness and filled it with light. Easels stood by the windows, canvases leaned against the walls. I picked up a brush, dipped it in crimson, and swept paint across a self-portrait in progress. Not the hollow widow from room 217, not the obedient wife of 43 years, but a woman standing in sunlight, her face turned toward the future. When the paint caught the light, I almost didn't recognize her. Strong, independent, untouchable. By 2 p.m., reporters gathered at City Hall for a press conference. Channel 7 News had asked me to share my story of financial elder abuse. I stepped up to the podium, heart steady, voice clear. My daughter once told me I was useless, that I should find somewhere else to die. She thought she'd taken everything: my home, my money, my dignity. But let me tell you, honey, sometimes the pawn becomes the queen. And now, I'm here to make sure no one else has to survive what I did. Flashbulbs popped, hands clapped. I felt none of the shame Victoria had tried to brand me with, only fire. That evening, back at the house, I poured a glass of Cabernet and stood at the window, watching the sunset burn across the trees I'd planted myself. 6 months ago, I'd been shoved into a motel room with $200 and a sagging mattress. Today, I was a millionaire philanthropist with a foundation, a documentary deal, and a voice that carried further than I ever dreamed. I raised the glass in a private toast to pawns, to queens. To revenge that isn't about getting even, it's about becoming everything they swore you'd never be. I took a sip, savoring the victory. And honey, let me tell you, the best part wasn't the money, the headlines, or even the justice. It was walking through my house, really mine now, knowing that no one could ever again tell me to find somewhere else to die. Because I had found somewhere to live, somewhere to reign, and I was never giving it back. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. And be honest, would you forgive a daughter who betrayed you? Or would you, like me, remind her that family isn't DNA, it's loyalty?